From You Go to Beginning. Today we are turning this into some mozzarella cheese. Alrighty, so we are making mozzarella cheese this week. It is still the height of milking season, and so we have more milk to deal with than I often know what to do with. So I have been trying to make cheese a bunch this year, trying to make sure that we're using up the milk that we have and putting it to good use. So I've made mozzarella several times, and I thought I would share how I've been doing it. It's pretty simple. It takes about an hour to do, and it uses up a bunch of milk. So I'm gonna use 2 gallons of milk today, and I'll show you the different processes as I do it. Step 1 is actually to I reuse my cheesecloth, so I get some boiling water and I stick my cheesecloth in boiling water. It's been sitting here for quite some time, so I can touch it, but I'll rinse this out and set that aside so my cheesecloth is all ready to go. I have my big bowl and my strainer. This is what I use to strain out the whey and the curds. I have my big pot on my stove. This is big enough to fit 2 gallons. I have my book already. This book is what I've been learning to make cheese with. It's David Asher's The Art of Natural Cheese Making. It's been awesome. It uses traditional methods. It uses clabber and natural fermentation processes. So a little different than normal cheese making, but it's been really, really good. And we're gonna be making a fast mozzarella today. So, and then actually this is kind of a sneak peek at the kitchen. I don't have an official video because we're not officially done, but we have floors and our stove and our cabinets in. It looks fantastic. The crown molding is actually not quite right. It's up there, but it's not finished. And this piece of countertop is not attached all the way, which is why we don't have the 2 drawers in, but it is fully functional and we've been using it and loving it. The kitchen has been serving us really, really well. Obviously, at some point, we'll also get a hood above the range. But for now, it has been wonderful. Life on the farm is busy with the animals outside. So indoor projects get put on hold. And we'll probably revisit this, probably honestly not until this winter again. And I am totally okay with that. It looks awesome. It works fantastically. And it has been a big blessing. So this is a little sneak peek at the kitchen. It's been like this for a long time. And I haven't made a finished video because it's not officially done, but I will try to I will make sure to get a final video when we actually finish up. But today we're on to cheese. So let me get out the milk and we'll get started. This is all chilled milk. It's important to make sure your milk is cold before you make mozzarella. It mentions in the book that warm mozzarella, when you add the acid, which I'm gonna use lemon juice, it will make it curdle if it's warm. All right, I'm all ready to go. I have my 2 gallons of milk in my pot. I have lemon juice. This is what I'm going to use to acidify the milk. And then I have rennet. This is a vegetable rennet. If I was going to buy it again, I would buy the animal rennet. This was just what Cultures for Health had when I ordered it a long time ago. It actually works just fine. I would just prefer it to be the animal rennet. I just didn't have it, but I did. And so the first thing we do is we're going to add the lemon juice. I could obviously squeeze it from lemons, but this is easier and organic and easier to store on hand. Keeps a little bit better than a lemon. So we're going to dilute a cup of this into 4 cups of water, and that's because I'm doing 2 gallons of milk. So it'd be half of that if you're just doing 1 gallon. So that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to put a cup of this into water. Now it looks cloudy because this is just one of the milk jars. Why get out extra dishes? So, and mason jars are measuring cups. So this is just one of the milk jars I dumped out. That's why the water's cloudy. And when I add the lemon juice, I can see easily how much I need to add. Let's see if I can open it with one hand. My hand is all wet. There we go. All right, so we add a cup. Cup right there. Okay. All right, swirl this around. And then the instructions say to make sure that as I put this in the milk, I want to make sure I dilute it and stir it around. And I actually just use a wooden spoon for that. So a little bit differently than commercial cheese making, we're not as worried about germs. I don't know. The cultures in the milk want to make cheese the way they're supposed to, and we just have to follow the process. So we need to be clean, but this does not have to be a sterile environment. This is a homestead. It's a family kitchen. It's not going to be perfect, and it's going to be okay. So I've done this several times. It works out great. And we're not leaving this to ferment or age or anything like that anyway. So we're definitely all good to go. So time to mix in the lemon juice, and I want to make sure I stir. One tip I've gotten and seen several times is to make sure to not stir in a circle, because then you'll create the little tornado effect, and it's really hard to get that circle to stop. So I can stir vigorously, I'm just not going to do it in a circle. I can go back and forth. Want to make sure this gets mixed in really well. The milk is still cold. I have not turned on the burner until I get this all mixed in. All right, so now we're going to turn on the burner and we are going to let this warm up until it's just getting to about 90 degrees. Think of we're trying to warm it up to get back to the temperature it was in the goat. Milk actually wants to be cheese. When a baby animal drinks the milk, it's warm out of its mama and warm into the tummy, and then it turns into cheese, and the babies digest it from there. So we're getting it warm. I just use a normal meat thermometer to check the temperature. It's about 90 degrees. I think you have anywhere between 90 and 100 degrees. It does not have to be perfect. I just want to keep stirring to make sure I got that lemon juice mixed in, but I don't have to stir the whole time. So I do also want to keep it from settling and starting to curdle. So I will stir it pretty consistently, but not necessarily the whole time. So we're still nice and cold. Our goal is to warm it up slowly and to not go super fast. So we're at 49 degrees. So this will take a few minutes. Once the milk gets up to temperature, I'll be adding the rennet. Now this is a vegetable rennet, and this is a double strength rennet. So a normal dose of rennet is 1/8 of a teaspoon, maybe 1/4 of a teaspoon. What is the normal dose? Yeah, so a normal dose is 1/4 teaspoon, but this is double strength, so that would only be 1/8 of a teaspoon, which is impossible to find a measuring spoon for. So that's actually also part of why I wait until I have 2 gallons of milk. Then I can actually use 1/4 teaspoon. And instead of that being for 1 gallon, it's for 2 gallons because this is double strength rennet. So I would actually probably avoid the double strength because it makes it frustrating to try to measure and harder to do that smaller batch. All right, we're almost there. 84, just a few more minutes to go. And then we will mix in the rennet. It's important to make sure that the rennet gets diluted and stirred in pretty well. Again, kind of the back and forth and top to bottom motion, not the circle. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. I could wait until it was over 90, but you do want it to be warm. So I'm getting close. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn the heat off. And then I have my 1/4 teaspoon of rennet in this little bowl. And I'm gonna actually get some milk in the bowl to mix it around and then mix it in. Make sure I rinse out my bowl. And I want to stir up and down for, I don't know, at least 30 seconds, I guess. Just, you want to make sure it's actually mixed all the way through. Okay. All right, then I actually let this sit for about 15 minutes to get a clean break, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's all set up. So I just put the lid on, heat off, lid on, and let it sit. All right, so while we are waiting for the curd to set up, I wanted to take a minute and show you the book that I've been using. It has been really awesome. It talks about the importance of sourcing really good quality raw milk and just the more natural processes and not having to always buy the starter cultures for cheese, which I think is awesome. And so learning how to use clabber, which I'm trying to start here on the counter. You raise it a lot like a sourdough starter. You feed it each day with fresh milk and change it out. So I'm still learning about that. Have not mastered that at all. But let me show you the book and the instructions and why I have really been enjoying it. Again, it is David Asher's Art of Natural Cheese Making. It is super easy to work through. It talks about all the different kinds of cheeses, and the beginning starts about like why you should care and what versions it should be. And then it starts with the instructions and the ingredients, and yeah, so the ingredients, the equipment you need, and step-by-step directions. And then it also has these awesome photos. So this is adding the lemon juice and the rennet, and then we're going to be checking for this clean break, and then the other pictures as well. So this has been awesome. We did use lemon juice instead of citric acid. It gives it a better flavor. It makes it taste a little lemony, but that's been a good thing in our experience. With citric acid, it really doesn't have much of a flavor at all. So the other thing that I'm doing a little bit different, I've seen a lot of recipes for mozzarella that use their microwaves, and our microwave actually broke. We don't have one anymore, and so we decided we didn't want to replace it since we had been considering getting rid of it anyway. And so I actually use the whey to heat it back up. It also makes it a little bit easier. In my experience, when I tried the microwave, the curds got really hot and it was too hot to handle, and it was a little frustrating. So I'll show you how I do it with the whey, and it's been a great process. It's super easy to do. And then I get to avoid using a microwave and don't have to worry about that type of exposure, whether I'm concerned about it or not. We hadn't really made a final decision ourselves, and it broke. So anyway, that's part of our process. We're just about ready for the curds to be set up, and I'll show you what we're looking for. Another tip, take notes. So I definitely don't remember everything I do each time, but so I have taken notes. It looks like this will be the 4th time I've made it from this book. I've made mozzarella a few times before this, but I'm taking notes on how much rennet I used. And the first time I made it, I used vinegar, and it didn't have much of a flavor at all. And then I was able to find some lemon juice, and that has been awesome. It has stretched really well. And then I tried it with 2 gallons, and I'm doing that again today. So it's possible that it won't set up or it won't stretch correctly today, and that's just part of cheese making. Take notes every time. I actually use this little piece of paper as my bookmark, and then I always have it nearby, and I can keep track of how it's been going. My timer has rung. It's been 15 minutes, so it's time to check the clean break. So I just take a finger, and I'm looking for it to break out in front of me, and that is pretty soft. So I'm actually gonna let this sit a little bit longer. I don't like how that's not quite breaking very cleanly. It's pretty messy, and it's kind of getting milky on my finger. So I'm going to let it sit another 5 minutes. So it's been 5 more minutes. So I'm gonna try again. You can see that the curd starts to pull away from the edge of the pot, and we've got some whey there. So I just stick a finger in. That is much better. I could probably do that, but I like it when that's better. But I'm actually going to wait longer. So I would rather, it's easier to work with when it gets the clean break. Yeah, that's better, but it's not quite ready. So I'm going to let it keep going. It's a lot easier to work with when the curds are firmer, and then you don't mess them up when you're stirring them around. Okay, so it's been 10 more minutes. I'm going to check again. There we go. So you can see the difference. It actually comes up and break. It's still not as hard as it could be. Oh, that's better there. I'm going to call it good. Oh, that's my timer right there. So that has been 30 minutes. And that's okay. You do want to kind of factor that in. I could have cut it earlier, but I don't have any problem waiting. Now I'm going to grab a knife and cut the curds, and then we'll go from there. You cut in a grid pattern. These are moving quite a bit. That's okay. As I spin around, well, they seem a slightly different texture than I've had before. But in the end, it doesn't matter too much. So it's spinning a bunch. And then you want to cut like down at an angle and get the curds that way. Okay. I can see some big ones. Okay. So I'm going to double check the next instruction. So I've just cut the curds here, and then we're going to stir them, and we just want to keep the temperature at that 90 degrees until they firm up and look a little bit more like this. So I actually just use a clean hand. It's easiest to be gentle. I want to reach down and stir these around, and they'll start to firm up. And then I should find some big ones as I'm stirring, and I will just take them and kind of let them break off my fingers. I don't want to mess them up too much. Yeah, so this is actually not as firm as it was the last time I made cheese. So these curds will be a little bit different. Be curious to see if it affects their stretching at all. Just kind of letting them break apart. Yeah, so I've got big chunks here that didn't get cut well. And I just kind of let them break and fall back in. But I don't want them to make a giant clump. I want to keep them somewhat separate. I don't want to obliterate them. So these are a little soft and they're coming apart some. But I'm just going to stir. I don't know, it takes several minutes, but the milk is still warm. I have not turned the heat back on in all this time. I might need to, but I don't think so. So I'm letting it break. And I can feel the texture starting to change. They're getting firmer against my hand. Just trying to break up those big ones. So the proteins come together and shrink up, and that's what the curd is. All right, so all the curds I'm feeling, it's only been a few minutes. All the curds I'm feeling are, the book describes it as a poached egg consistency. So definitely much firmer. I think a poached egg is probably the best way to describe it. That's kind of what it feels like. So I'm going to use my awesome slotted spoon here. I just got this on Amazon. It's not officially a cheese spoon, but it works great. So I scoop out the curds. Ooh, I should probably have gotten my bowl a little closer. Let's see if I can manage that. Okay, so I've got my big bowl with my colander and this cheesecloth spread all over. The cheesecloth is wet. I heard a tip from Beth Doherty that the cheese won't stick to wet cheesecloth, and so far that has proven true. So I put some boiling water on there to clean the cheesecloth way before we started this process. And then I just squeezed it out. And then it's wet and ready for this. So I don't have a bowl big enough to dump all of this in and be able to collect all the way. So it is far easier to use this slotted spoon than to try to pour it off into a different container. Now, I've never actually weighed it, but I do get quite a bit of cheese out of this 2 gallons of milk. So these are the curds and whey. Little Miss Muppet sitting on top of eating her curds and whey. And then when you hang it and they knit together, then it becomes a cheese. So... you do want to try to get out everything, obviously. I don't want to leave anything behind. So this is how much we've got here. Looks awesome. So up next is to hang this. I usually get a string and just tie it up in a knot and then hang it from my kitchen cabinets here. I think Damien's gonna get me a hook for underneath the cabinets, so I'm not messing with the door handles. But I just get a little piece of kitchen twine, tie it all up, and then let it hang. So this is it. I mean, the cheese is made. The last step is to let it hang and get some of the whey out. And you can see under here, I definitely have some in there. Ooh, there we go. The whey is coming out here. We're going to wrap this up and get it hanging. All right, that's it. Just kitchen twine hanging from my cabinet over the bowl. I will actually let it hang here for about 30 minutes. So this process is a little bit longer than an hour, but while I was letting the cheese set and while I am hanging it, that is hands-off time. I can be doing something else. I can walk away. I don't have to monitor this or babysit it. So it's not so bad. You just have to have time to let it go and then be able to come back and check on it. So 30 minutes to hang to get most of the whey out. And then we will get it to stretch. So we'll come back in 30 minutes. Alrighty, it has been 30 minutes. It's actually been a few minutes longer than that. So I'm going to take this down. And a few minutes ago, I turned this on. So this is just all the whey. And this is what I'm going to use to heat up and stretch my curd. So I am actually heating this up to about 150, nice and warm. It's almost there. It's climbing nicely. If I was going to do so, I think you can make ricotta or other cheeses. You probably would not want to use this like this, but this is just going to get fed to the chickens, and so they don't care what I do with it. So this is the easiest thing, the least amount of dishes. It's already sitting here in my pot anyway, and so I'm going to heat this up and use that to stretch it. I'm going to get this down and show you what it looks like. Alrighty, here it is. So yes, the wet cheesecloth makes a huge difference. I've done it before without getting it wet and it all sticks, but I just pull it out and there we are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, at least the directions in the book say to slice this, and then I'll put each slice into the warm whey and then stretch them in individual units. And that makes it easier to deal with than having a whole block of cheese. I guess I could probably stick this whole thing in the pot of whey and heat it up. But I've been slicing it. That's the way the book has you do it. And it's worked really well. So that's what I'm going to do. All right. Just going to slice this. You can see it stays together really well. It does have some whey in it, but that's okay. And then I always take the end piece because it's the smallest. I'm going to stick it in my bucket of whey over here, which is really warm. Let it sit for a couple of minutes and then see if I can get it to stretch. The key, at least I think, is making sure it actually gets hot enough. So the whey is about 150 degrees. and let it stay in there long enough that it will actually stretch for me. All right, so it's been a little bit. I'm gonna pull this out and I'm going to see if I can stretch it. So it's starting to stretch, but it's not stretching super far. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to put it back in the way and let it continue to heat up. As it gets warmer, I notice that it usually works better. So if it's not stretching for you yet, get it warmer. So you can already see how much better it stretches now. All right. And I'm now remembering that I forgot to get out something, which is some salt. So I'm gonna stick this back in the way just to get it warm. And then I'm also gonna put in these other slices. So we're gonna put in all these slices here, and I'm just gonna put them in the way and let them start to warm up. You can see that after I cut them, whey spilled out of them and is all over the cutting board. But that is okay. This cutting board with the edges is very nice. And sometimes these get a little stuck together in the pot, but honestly, it doesn't matter. So they're all in there. We're gonna let them get all warmed up. I'm gonna leave the little ball here. So now what I'm gonna do is, as I stretch it, I'm going to add salt to it. So I just pour a little bit of salt on a plate, but I'm gonna have to wash my hands to get the salt out, and then we'll come back. Okay, so I have this piece. It is stretching well. So what I do is I just grab a big hunk of salt and put it in and fold it in. I want to salt the cheese, and I want to stretch it and fold it on itself a bunch of times. And then I kind of roll it in a ball, and then even dip it back in the whey to warm it back up. And kind of make it a ball. And then what I do is I set it on my cutting board, and it will kind of like flatten. And then I'll put it in this cold whey. This is just the bucket that the bowl that was draining. I'll stick the mozzarella in the cold whey to help it solidify. So I'm looking for the next piece, and these could all be melted together at this point. Oop, not quite. Ooh, they're getting toasty. And I'm just stretching them. Yes, they're nice and warm. So I'm gonna grab some salt, put it all down it, and stretching them several times. And I noticed that when I got it to actually stretch like this, it really helps the texture. But you can see as I mess with it, then it kind of stops stretching. So I just warm it back up. And then it stretches some. This one is not stretching as well as that first one. And I don't know. It still tastes good. So I don't know if there's any official problem with it not stretching super well. I notice the warmer I get, the better it works. So that's it. I'm gonna do that process for all those little pieces. I did warm it back up. Okay, so I'm gonna set it here and see how this one flattened out. So now that it's flat, I'm gonna stick it in the cool whey, and that will help it, it'll stop changing shape. So as it cools down, it will keep its shape and be all good to go. And that's it. I'm just gonna repeat that process, and we'll have cheese at the end. All right, so I actually just let the whole big clump join together, and I am noticing that I am getting a really great stretch on this. And so I actually added back in the two little pieces that I worked with at first, and I am just stretching this over itself. Over and over. So I have not salted it yet, but that is probably the most stretch I've ever gotten on one. Look at how cool that is. Just make sure all of it gets stretched. And here, and then I will work some salt into this, and then I will actually maybe even salt the brine, salt some of the whey, and let it sit in some salty brine. And then we'll have mozzarella. But just a little bit of salt, and this is all done.